This time between Christmas and New Year's Eve is probably my most favorite time of the year. It's after all that hustle and bustle, Christmas, the stress, and then you get this whole week in between. It's like a Selah moment. In the Psalms when you read the Psalms and you get to this place and you see that word Selah. It means pause. It means to think, meditate. And what I like to do is I like to think about just the things that I've planned and scoped out for the coming year, classes that I'm going to start for ministry, and maybe retreats that we're going to do, and just the things that we may have planned. And then for family, when my kids were younger, I used to think about their events and school and things that they do. And now I'm in transition, thinking about that now that they're all grown up. And personally, just to have, how can I improve in spiritual disciplines, my prayer life, reading of God's word, and self-enrichment, taking care of myself, better health, that kind of thing. But before I look forward, and like even in the Psalms, sometimes the psalmist will go back and he'll look back at what God has done. You got to look back. You got to look back at the past year, and I like to see if, God's sovereignty and things that have happened, how He's orchestrated things, what's happened in the last 12 months, and do that really because we want to stay in His will. And as I look back 12 months for us as a church, all the things that I planned and wanted to do, the classes I wanted to start, it came to a screeching halt. Because a year ago, the only thing forward was forward that way to the bathrooms. You guys remember that? Okay, some of you weren't here, maybe. So kind of right now, I'm just kind of like a church, state of the church address, if you will, but not really. But I want to look back just over a couple interesting observations. Because last year we were wondering, what's going on? What's going on? We were trying to maintain meeting week to week. We were in reactionary mode, if you will. And, we want to look forward, but I think it was probably in God's will that we stopped. Yes. Stopped getting ahead of Him. That was an interesting observation. The other one, if you look back from week to week, and if you were here for the most part, coming Sunday to Sunday, listening to Dave's messages, our messages, there was a recurring theme. There was a recurring theme in the messages. And I looked back. You can check this out. Go on our website, and you can see each message, or you can listen to each message every week. But there's this recurring theme. It was for the church to get right. The church looks like the world, and we should be in pursuit of righteousness and holiness. You look at Dave's first message of the year, it was on obedience. And, he read through the Bible every year of his life, is it, Dave, or 2 times? I can't remember, just a whole oogles amount of times. And he reflected on the things that God revealed to him by reading through the Bible every year of his life. And one of the titles of his messages, if you remember, is The Church Needs to Get Right. I did a message on knowing God, and Dave did a couple of messages. We used the same text. It was that text in Matthew 7 where Jesus speaking to the believers at the time, the Jewish believers, and they said, we did this in your name, and so on, and He never knew you. I never knew you. And then finally, there's a series that Dave preached in Thessalonians, and if you were paying attention, he said that this is probably the most important message this year. Whenever Dave says something like that, my ears kind of, the most important. It was when he was wrapping up the book, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and I want to start there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. Now may the God of peace Himself sanctify you complete, and may your entire spirit and soul and body be kept blamelessly in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ. Did I say 24 too? Faithful is He who calls you, who also will do it. Let's go back to 23. That whole recurring theme, if you remember, we would always hear that the church has lost its moral compass. And what God is speaking to us all year, this theme of 2017, is we need to be prepared for His coming. The church needs to get right. But notice it says here, may the God of peace Himself sanctify you, And may your entire soul, spirit, and body, your whole being, if you will, be kept blameless. It's God doing that. You know, Paul, this is his benediction. He's wishing that for you. But this is doubt. We don't know if it's going to happen. I think it's optative verb, Dave. I don't know, the Greek grammar expert here. They're optatives, which means doubt. And, you know, can God do that? Yes, he can. He says, Paul's reinforcing it here. But do we have a role in it? You know, is this something God responds to? If you remember the prior 4 verses, I think it is, there's imperatives. Don't quench the spirit. Don't despise prophecies. Abstain from every form of evil. Actually, I believe that's you. Abstain yourself from every form of evil. And you know, you do all that, and then may the God of peace sanctify you. May the God of peace keep you blameless. You know, I read the Bible every year, and I go through it, and this year I got ahead of myself. I finished it last month. And so you know, where do you start? I start over. I was in Genesis. I was in this text, I was looking at this, and you know, can God make me holy? Can God keep me blameless? And I got into Genesis chapter 20. You know the story after Sodom and Gomorrah was destructed, and Abraham and Sarah, they journey through, and they settle, and they run into Abimelech. If you remember that. And what does Abraham say? Tell him you're my sister. He was fearful that, you know, they would probably kill him and take his wife. And then they didn't want him to, he was fearful of that. So God speaks to Abimelech and says, you're a dead man. And interesting thing, Abimelech says, I'm innocent out of the integrity of my heart. I didn't know that was my wife. Listen to what God says in Genesis chapter 20, verse 6. Then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know that in the integrity of your heart you have done this, and I also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Can God do that in your life? Are you struggling with something that's keeping you from him? Do you have the faith, the confidence to know that he can do that? But notice what it says. For him to do that, I know that in the integrity of your heart. How's your heart? You want God to work in your life? Get your heart right. You know, David was a man after God's own heart. He did the worst sins ever. But God honored his legacy. He was honest about his heart. He repented. He said sorry. Stop it. Whatever you're doing. I think this is amazing. I just read this a couple of weeks ago. I kept you from sinning against me. God could keep you from sinning against him. And so as he wraps up the book last year, we went on to, where are we at now? The Nehemiah? And Dave's using this as a blueprint. God's directing us to see this as a blueprint to move forward next year. And the first thing we plan to do is a hard thing. It's to pray and fast. You heard him earlier. We're starting next Sunday. You know, I've been in the ministry for decades. And I think the hardest thing to do, every church I've only been to 2, mainly this one, for the last 25 years. But I've visited others. I talked to other pastors. And the hardest thing for all of them to get established is a prayer meeting. We showed a video. We tried to rally the church to do that. We said we're going to start prayer, make it the most important thing that we do. By attendance, it's not the most important thing that we do. It's the hardest thing. Okay, so it's a really hard thing to do. But you know, there's books and there's articles written by successful and productive people, and they've done studies on it, and you know what they say that these successful and productive people do? They take care of the hard things first. We're doing the hard thing. We're following this blueprint in Nehemiah to fast and pray in the first couple of chapters or wherever it is. That's the first thing he did. Remember Dave's first couple of messages? Second Chronicles chapter 7, where it says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, pray and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven and he'll heal our land. That's the blueprint. That's where we're going. With that plan, we have this plan. There's challenges to plans, right? What are a lot of people planning to do? What do they do about this time of the year? They make New Year's resolutions. In a sense, we're making a New Year's resolution. We're saying we're going to fast and we're going to pray. And we're going to maintain this throughout the year, are we? We're making that resolution. But you know what the problem is? There's kind of a New Year's resolution curse. Over 90% of them fail. That's a big number. And so, out of curiosity, I did a Google search and I said, why New Year's resolutions fail? And I looked at every article of the experts and the psychologists and scientists and social scientists, all these people that wrote these things. And interesting, the 3 reasons why they fail, 5 reasons why they fail, 10 reasons why they fail, and then they gave solutions and how to come up with solutions to not fail. Interesting thing, there was 4 common things that they came up with, and there's actually biblical truths to them. And so I kind of put them together for us today and thinking, how are we going to prepare ourselves for this coming year as a New Year's resolution to fast and pray, to make this commitment and fast and pray. And I came up with this acrostic. It's a word, and every first letter, it's the word hard. We're going to do a hard thing. We're going to do the hard thing first. We're going to pray, and we're going to fast. We want to be like these productive, successful people and follow through with it. And the first letter in the word hard is H, and that stands for habit. Habit basically is a behavior, right? There's good ones and there's bad ones. One of the articles said that to make your resolutions work, you have to change behaviors and establish habits, good habits, in order to do that. You have to change your thinking and rewire your brain. We don't pray and fast because we don't make it a habit of it. My son back there, he competed in speech and debate last year in his senior year, and he had this speech that he took all the way to nationals, and it's had this profound impact on my life. And one of the things that I took away from it was that you don't break a habit. You replace it. Some of you guys were at the men's retreat and you saw it. I think you saw his speech. It's a 10-minute speech. And I think I'm gonna carry that for the rest of my life. You replace it. He talks about what the author, I think his name was Duhigg, calls the habit loop, where it begins with the cue and it ends with the reward. The cue is a trigger, and the reward is really what you want to arrive at. It could be peace. In this case, let's just say peace and contentment. And the trigger, is the emotion. You want to relieve the stress, right? The routine in between it. There's a cue, routine, and a reward. The routine in the middle of it is your behavior, is your habit. And some people might smoke. We're telling you let's create a habit of prayer. Let's change that. Let's change the bad habit into let's replace it. So that's kind of so everything I do now, and I kind of reevaluate it and I assess it. Is that a good habit or a bad habit? What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to feel something, I'm trying to arrive at a place, and what am I doing to get there? Is that a good habit or a bad habit? And I work on replacing it. Well, Jesus had a habit. He had good habits. There are no bad habits that Jesus had. You can find one of them in Luke chapter 22. It says here, and he came out and proceeded as was his custom to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed him. When he arrived at the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw and he knelt down and began to pray. Did I give you 42? Or is that it? Yeah, that is it. Okay. Back to 39. Notice it says, verse 39, and he came out and proceeded as was his custom to the Mount of Olives. That word custom is the Greek word ethos. And, you may look at it as just a customary law, ordinance thing they did, but it's not. It's a habit. It's also the word for habit. It's something that Jesus did, he adopted for himself. And everybody knew he was doing that. Judas knew he was doing that. That's how he called on the guards to apprehend him. Some of the translations you'll see that it's as he usually did. As he'd normally always go to the Mount of Olives and he'd pray. It's something that he always regularly do. So it's a habit. Once you establish a good habit, it should no longer be difficult to achieve. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Remember, changing behaviors, to do it, you have to change your thinking. And Romans 2 says the renewing of your mind is going to help us. We don't want to be like the world. Remember, the whole theme of last year was the church looked like the world. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, establishing these habits that we can overcome the failing of a New Year's resolution. And in this case, we want to pray, right? We want to do the hard thing. So once you establish a habit, the next solution in our acrostic is accountability. The letter A. You establish a habit, but to continue on in it, you need accountability. Remember, there's 4 solutions, and out of all the solutions, I think accountability was probably in each and every one of them. Some of them had this one and that one, but accountability was in there. They'd say things like, you lack social support. You fail in your resolution because you have no social support. One of them said, you're going it alone. And because of that, you have no social support. No one is holding you accountable. One of the studies in these articles said, do not underestimate the power that social support has. They studied people that joined the weight loss program of people, and they looked at those that invited at least one friend. So there's probably groups of 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and then they had some that did it alone. The findings were that 95% of them that did it with a friend or more people finished the program. And then there was about, I think it was 66% kept the weight off. The ones that did it alone, I think it was like 60-some%, 76% actually finished, and only about 20% kept the weight off. You're talking from 66 to about 20, that's 1/3 of the people that kept it off because they had an accountability partner. They had the iron sharpening iron. They had people encouraging each other to do it. Can we do that with praying and fasting next week? Can we call somebody? Can we connect with someone and say, hey, can you keep me committed to this? Let's look at Hebrews chapter 10. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. Verse 25. Not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Changing the habit here of a bad habit to a good one is let's encourage each other to do good deeds. Really, and some translations say, let us stir one another. Let's keep each other accountable. I like the word stir. It's the hard thing. I say it's hard because I'm in subjunctive mode right now. I don't know if we will. I've tried for year after year after year, decade after decade, to establish a strong prayer meeting. We still have one, okay? But I'm just saying, I don't see everybody there. I dare you to show up. you know, it's kind of, I don't know what else to say. You know, I double dog dare you. Go back to my youth. you know, I don't think they say that anymore. But, you know, it's the hard thing. Back to what I said in the beginning. Let's do the hard thing first, and that's what we're going to try to do next week. You know, we're going to begin praying, and hopefully, you know, we'll see a prayer meeting and begin fasting. You know, but even with a good habit and this accountability, you can still fail in your resolution. The next thing that you need to do is that you need to know your reason. You know, you need to know your reason why, and that's your reason. Why are we going to fast and pray? Are we just doing it because the church is doing it, I'm just going to do it too? Sometimes, and that's okay, but I think you're setting yourself up to fail. Know why we're praying. Know why we are fasting. Why are we going to fast and pray? These articles that I read about reason, the why, your resolution lacks meaning. It lacks purpose. And because of that, you're not passionate enough about it. So when we go to pray and fast, here's your barometer. Here's how you check it. Are you passionate to do it? Are you? Or you just heard Dave come up here and say, we're going to pray, we're going to fast. And he just says, okay, I'll go. How are you responding to that? We have to evaluate and see how we're responding to the call. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and sin which so easily entangles us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Look at verse 2 here. It says here, Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Jesus endured the cross. What drove him? What's the reason why? Why? You know, I really believe it's love. It was his love for the Father to be reconciled with him, because at the end of this verse, he sat down at the right hand of the throne. He wanted to be reconciled there. But even more than that, it's because of us. He wants to reconcile us with him and the Father. Let that sink in for a little bit. Yeah, he sat on the right hand of the throne of God, but really he came down here really for us, right? When a runner trains and runs a race, it's the joy of crossing the finish line. Look here, it says, for the joy set before him endured the cross. When a baseball player keeps his eye on the ball, it's the joy of getting on base, crossing home plate. When a wide receiver catches the football, he fixes his eyes on the football. It's the joy of catching it and making that first down, or crossing the goal line, making a touchdown. But as Christians, to effectively live holy and righteous lives, we need to fix our eyes on Jesus. Not the law, right? I think the law takes care of itself if you fix your eyes on Jesus. And then when we do fix our eyes on Jesus, is it because we love him? Is it for the love relationship we would have with one another? You and Jesus, me and Jesus. Are you driven by a love for him? Augustine said, when you love God, doing what you please will be good. In other words, you're doing it for the right reason, because you love him. So why are we preparing to fast and pray next month? What is our reason? Is it for holiness and righteousness, direction, to heal our land? If you're listening to the messages, for God to hear us? Is it for our love for him, our relationship with him? You see, because if you're driven by love, the next solution, the last solution to overcome the failure of a New Year's resolution will be easy. These are hard things to do, to create a habit, to maintain accountability, right? They're not easy. And a lot of times, it's because we don't even know the reason, just to know why we're doing it. And even if you know the reason, what happens? We just we still don't have the passion sometimes, right? Well, because of that, you need discipline, which is our last letter. Hard. Habit, accountability, know the reason why. Discipline. Discipline is the fourth and final reason why. One of the things said in the article is it's just you have too much thinking and you're not enough doing. Discipline is basically action, taking action. But even more than that, it's following through when you don't feel like it. Following through when you don't feel like praying and fasting. I don't feel like going on Sunday night. In James chapter 1, verse 22, it says, "But be doers of the word, not hearers only." Because what happens? You say you want to do it, you're deceiving yourself. I like, prayer is important. Prayer is important. Everybody agrees prayer is important, right? But when you don't do it, you're deceiving yourself. That's James. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. It says, "Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. But I discipline my body," there's that word, "and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." Is that it, Jade? Yep. Notice the word discipline. It's the Greek word hupopiazo. Hope I pronounced that right. If you remember Dave's first message of last year, it was on obedience. And you probably heard him say this before. Obedience is, there's that word hupo. Is it hupo? Come under? To come under. Basically, the word means subjecting your body to hardship. But when you break it down and get the literal definition, it's that place under the eyes of your face. It has that idea of taking a blow right there, and you're getting a black eye. That's the literal Greek word picture, if you will. And it gets black and blue, and that kind of. Notice here, it says, "I beat my body and make it my slave." That's the emphasis of it. It's under the eye. That's why you got that word in there. And it's got that idea where you're subjecting your body to hardship. If you've exercised or competed in athletics, it's when you come up with those terms, mind over matter, no pain, no gain. When you think of discipline, that's what that is. I'm hungry, stay off it. I want sugar, stay off it. You discipline your body yourself. You beat your body right, like it says here. Over the years, I put together a self-confrontation class at BCF, Biblical Counseling Foundations, and I did it every 2 years. And it's a hard class to put together, which I hope to do it again, but it's just so difficult because it involves so many pieces, and we got to make sure we have them all to be successful. But one of the speakers that I had was the late Pastor Don Hamer, and he spoke of discipline as maturity, because in his class it was about disciplining children, raising children to maturity. And so kids, we are all born into sin, and we have to, he defined it as saying no to your body. When you say no to your body, and you're doing that with your children as you raise them, you're saying no. You don't do that. And they do things to the body that might hurt them, or they go places, and not just the body, but the mind, right? And so that's the idea of discipline. I saw a couple of weeks ago, the Los Angeles Lakers retired a couple jerseys for Kobe Bryant, and he, in his closing words, and what he said really wasn't all that deep, but I think it was how he said it. You know, and it really was he's known to be just an extremely hard worker, a very disciplined athlete, and he just said this, real simple. Those times when you get up early, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5, running your sprints. Those times when you get up early, and those times when you work hard. You work so hard, you stay up late, you work hard. And he's saying this with all this emotion, and he's almost tearing up, and he says, those times when you don't feel like working, you're too tired, you don't want to push yourself. He said these 5 words, but you do it anyway. That's discipline. You're going to come pray, you're going to come fast. Do it anyway. A couple days ago, I read an article where it said these 8 to 10 self-made millionaires were not A students. They all had one trait. Most of them were C average students. Not that you need to pursue C's, okay? You should always pursue excellence. But I think they were working hard. They were hardworking C students. There were people that probably just didn't have the mental capacity, the ability to put together things that way, but they worked hard. They came from poor middle-class families. And the one trait they had, they described it like this. They said, individuals who struggle academically, not the lazy ones, the ones who struggle through hard work, may be more accustomed to dealing with struggle and making it a daily habit to overcome pitfalls. Through hard work, and even though they don't succeed, they keep getting back up. Let that sink in. What are you working on right now? What are you striving for? Where's your challenge? We all, at whatever age you are, you're trying to maintain something, whether it's your health or academics or work, right? We're all trying to do something. Get back up. I want to close with this verse. It's Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16. For a righteous man falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in time of calamity. You know, I think this is just a saying when he says 7 times. I think when a righteous man falls a lot of times is what he means. He keeps getting back up. What happens when you fall? It hurts. You scrape yourself. You get a bruise. Some people even break bones. It's going to be hard to get up there, but you get back up. You get back up. So next week, next year, next month, as we move forward, we want to do the hard thing first. We're going to pray. We're going to fast. Productive, successful people do the hard things first. Join us. Join us when we do that. We're calling all the church to do that. But do these things. Establish good habits to get there. Rewire your brain. Get your head in the game, if you will. Find someone around here that will keep you accountable, that will meet with you there, wherever you go. Start a prayer meeting. You know, it only takes one person, 2 people, I mean. You bring one with you. Show up at a prayer meeting. Know why you're doing it. What is the reason? What is the reason you're doing it for? Are you driven by love? And lastly, you know, have the discipline to stay there. But when you know the reason, the discipline should just click in for you when you arrive at that. So first, change your habits. Be accountable. Know the reason for your commitment. And have the discipline to follow through. Let's pray.